So welcome, Eric Kohner, to the UpLevel Podcast. You are our first guest in this new season, the ROI of Coaching in the Workplace. And for many reasons, people have just heard your bio. But from my perspective and Rachel's perspective, we wanted you here to kick off the season because you are what we call an OP, an original player. You are an original player in the coaching industry and specifically bringing coaching into the workplace. So thank you for being here with us and sharing this legacy that you've created and that you're ongoingly creating.
I'm already enjoying myself.
You can see folks.
And I'm honored.
Yeah. Well, okay. Take us back to the beginning. What year was it? Where was Eric Kohner? How did coaching find you?
So 1985, I was an actor. I'd like to say I was this really brilliant actor going nowhere. And there was a place called AIP, which stands for Actors Information Project. And it was a resource center for actors. And they offered a lot of things. Back then, personal computers weren't happening yet. So they had electronic computer services. They had a resource library. They had agent and casting director workshops. And they had this thing called consulting for the business of acting. And my consultant was Henry Kinsey Ouch. And I got introduced to, I would say this is before coaching was a thing, but I got introduced to some of the concepts that eventually became coactivity way back in 1985. And there were some other people at AIP like Cynthia Lloyd-Jones, Rick Tamlin, that also were early people in the coactive world. And that's where we all met.
And how would you describe those times? The times of like the birthing of this profession, this industry?
Okay, so first of all, I didn't know that anything was getting birthed. All I knew was that what I was doing with Henry, and then also Cynthia. Cynthia was my coach for a while, or consultant, I should say. It just changed the way that I was showing up in the acting world. I started taking responsibility for my career. I started becoming proactive. And not only that, I started using what was called consulting for my whole life. It just changed my entire life. And at a certain point, Henry was developing all this new material, and he wanted to start training consultants. And Cynthia and I and maybe, 8 or 9 other people went through what was called the consultants training program. And I actually became a consultant for AIP for a while. Then I moved, this was all in New York City, and I moved out to California, Hollywood.
Yeah, you did.
To get more acting work. And AIP started sending me other actors to start coaching. And by the way, at that time, I only thought that this stuff that I was learning worked with actors. I had a very, very limited view of this work. So that's how I started. Yeah.
And then when was the moment or the time when you knew that it could be utilized for people from all backgrounds and perspectives and identities?
And it was a gradual thing. I mean, I was coaching actors, and then also around that time, both Coach U and CTI got established, and they started calling it coaching. Okay, and I was actually Cynthia's coming up a lot because we were partners. Cynthia and I actually went through Coach U, and CTI at the same time. And we started realizing, hey, this might work not only with actors, but also writers and producers and directors. So we started branching out. Once again, I was still in the entertainment industry, but then gradually we started joining networking groups, and we started coaching entrepreneurs and professionals. Then eventually we became front of the room leaders for CTI, and that kind of expanded into, oh, this is a profession. And I really want to highlight that Laura Whitworth, who's no longer with us, she passed away about 15 years ago, was also one of the founders or co-founders of the CTI. And she really taught me that this could be a profession. She was a visionary. I would say she was the mother of the coaching profession. Without her, there would be no coaching profession.
I'm holding back a question I want to ask you right from that. But before I ask that one, how do you define coaching now? I understand that it's evolved specifically in those early years, but what's your definition of it?
You know, I've got to be honest. I've given up trying to define coaching. You know, all I know is that it's given me the opportunity to be of service in the world in a way that I don't think I ever had before. I used to, and I still love acting. I get the contribution of what actors do in the world. But this really gave me the opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives like I never had before. And I think that coaching today is really about tapping into people's aliveness and then creating from that.
Tapping into people's aliveness and then creating from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What feels important about that in this moment in time? We know we've been through unprecedented crisis, chaos, and change. We're just coming out of that podcast season. So what's important about really co-creating with people's aliveness in this moment?
Great question. I think that more than ever, and this is where I think we can kind of segue a little into, organizations and why it's important now. That, I mean, I shouldn't say that. We don't all know this, but the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We live in a VUCA world. And coaching, I believe, first of all, I believe it's a leadership competency that all leaders need to have coaching skills today, whether they're professional coaches or not. And coaching is the answer to VUCA.
I'm so with you on that. It's why we're having these conversations. We want to inspire and educate more leaders and organizations to bring this technology into their organization, like you said, to train people managers in it, to have internal coaches, to bring external coaches in. Right. And so tell us about, because you were around when coaching was brought inside an organization. You're actually celebrating a 20-year anniversary with one of your organizational clients. Is that correct?
Yes, March.
Yes, congratulations.
Actually, what's the date?
Today is March 7th, 2024.
So I believe it was March 9th, 24. So 2 days away from the actual anniversary. But yeah, 20 years with a company called Capgemini. And and the story behind that, 20 years ago, coaching wasn't a thing yet in an organization. I mean, it was just beginning to be a thing. Now, a lot of organizations get it, but back then, it was kind of it wasn't cutting, it was bleeding edge. And what I mean by that is that um, only the kooks inside organizations got it. Only the people that really, really were forward thinking. Okay. And there was a lot more resistance. I still remember we would go in and people would look like we were from outer space,
Yeah.
teaching some of the concepts. And today, people get it. People get that, servant leadership, that, listening, that being curious, that balancing problem solving with, relationship are equally important. So I've really seen the curve, specifically with Capgemini, but with many organizations that I've worked with. Yeah.
How do you think this has not only supported workplaces to evolve, but humanity to evolve? Because you've watched this for 2 decades now and you've been a part of it.
I really don't have the answer to that other than people. Yeah, people are now wanting more than just their professions, and I think businesses are starting to realize that. I mean, there's a lot of talk about employee retention, employee engagement, um, and I also think, and I want to give younger people a lot of credit for it. They want to have meaning in their work. They want they they want it to be. When we came in 20 years ago, basically it was the bottom line P&L, which is still important. I get it in business, but I think in today's environment, and COVID, I think also made that really, really clear that, quality of life is as important as your job. And I think that coaching helps facilitate that. I also think in a traditional sense, the side effect is that people perform better when they're happy. People perform better when they have meaning, when they feel valued, when they're on purpose. So those are all things that coaching can help facilitate.
And beyond being on faculty for the Coactive Training Institute for, I think, coming up on 30 years, is that right? You're coming up on 30 years. Yeah. You and Cynthia were two of the originals. And so another milestone, Eric. Thank you for your contribution.
A lot of milestones.
It's a big year, 2024 for Eric Kohner. You've also co-created and created your own work, birthed out of the coaching industry. So you have a program called Badass that you bring inside organizations like Capgemini. What is Badass leadership?
So Badass is an acronym, and we believe that 21st century leaders need to be badasses. And the acronym is leaders need to be bold, authentic, disruptive, agile, spacious, and supportive.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And they also need to be integrated. What I mean by that is they need to not just use their rational mind, but they also need to come from their heart, their gut, where intuition resides, their groin, where passion and creativity, and then their hands, which is the expressive, kinesthetic part of the body that also makes things. So we use those two models, and I also came up with a phrase around badass. Badass. You've heard of mindfulness?
Of course. Yes.
Yes. Badass is mindlessness.
Mindlessness.
And what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
What I mean by that is it's not about not using your mind. It's about using your mind less so that you can tap into heart, gut, mind, and hands more.
And boy, do we need that on the planet.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's what we've been into organizations. Yeah. With
What's it? Okay. So some folks who will be listening, they know you. They're like fans of Eric Kohner. You've probably trained them or coached them over the years. And there'll be some people new to you. And one of the things that I know is very unique about Eric Kohner is that he breaks the mold of what does it look like to be corporate. This is something that it's part of your purpose statement, even. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about how coaching gave you courage to be your unique self and work in environments that might be more like, say, buttoned up or polished, or we have this perception of what does professional look like.
Yeah. You're reminding me of the story of actually how I got into Capgemini. I was teaching a class in Norway, and well, before I go there, one of the biggest gifts of me being an actor is, and it's related to your question, is that as an actor, I had to be unrealistic because it's such a hard profession. So I had to have big dreams. I had to, I had to go after things, even though, I knew 99% of the time I wasn't going to get it. And that gave me a lot of permission to dream as a coach.
Mm.
So you're right. I don't have a traditionally corporate background, but I knew intuitively that the work that I was doing could be beneficial in that environment.
Okay.
And I just started dreaming. And within maybe a year, I was leading a class in Norway, and I got into this huge confrontation with somebody, and I pissed them off so much that this woman literally ran up to the front of the class, grabbed me by, my shirt, and was ready to hit me. And I just looked at her and I said, "Go ahead, take your best shot. I'm not backing down." And what I didn't know at the time is that she was a gold medal Olympic long distance racer. She probably could have kicked my ass. But the next day she came up to me and she said, "There's only one other person that has impacted me as strongly as you." And I said, "Who?" And she said, my Olympic coach. That's when I found out she was an Olympic coach. One of the other participants witnessed that and came up to me and said, "Will you consider coming into my company?" And what I didn't know was her company was Capgemini. So my dream actually got actualized. And the reason why she brought me in was I asked her, I said, "I have no corporate experience. Why did you hire me?" And she said 2 reasons. She said, your fearlessness and your ignorance.
Fearlessness
You have no
and
idea.
ignorance.
Yeah. Fearlessness and ignorance. She said, you have no idea you're breaking all the unwritten rules, but you do it with such confidence that people think you know what you're talking about. And that's how I got into Capgemini.
And that's so you, right? Like, and you've stayed true. You haven't. Are you able to share your life purpose statement?
I've stayed ignorant.
Yeah, well, and true to you.
If you want, okay, true to me. Well, if I'm going to do that, I got to put on my hat.
Great. Eric's putting on his purpose hat, and we're going to hear his life purpose statement revealed. Here.
I am a clueless, bad motherfucker lovingly and vulnerably will transform you. And if you ask me how, I don't know.
There he is, folks. Eric Kohner. Yeah. You're a badass motherfucker who transforms people lovingly. You have such an ability to see people deeply and pull on those strings in both a loving way and a fierce. Like you're fierce. You're fierce. When I met you, I was actually living in New York City and I was assisting a coactive course because you were living in New York too, or you're going back and forth between Pasadena.
I'm going back, yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember you, it was a process course, I think. And we were,
I think I was living in Europe at the time, actually, when I met you. I think it was Europe, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just, you were like so relentless in having people be honest with themselves. In this context, it was about what they couldn't be with. And,
I pissed some people up in that class too.
Yeah, you pissed a few people up, buddy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
It's been part of your brand and it's worked for you. Like what are some things? Tell us a little bit. Like you are one of our elders, there's so much we can learn from you. What are some things that you're really proud of from your journey? And then what are some things that maybe you do differently sitting and from this perspective, looking backwards?
Well, I think some of the things I'm most proud of are some of the things that I do differently today.
Interesting.
Like that fierceness that I started out with. I've tempered over the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years. I think some of it had to do with becoming a parent. Some of it had to do with the environment has changed. There's certain things that we were doing back in the old days that just don't fly today.
Yeah.
And some of it, I think, just has to do with aging. I think I've become a lot softer.
You have.
Over the last, and that fierceness that you're talking about is more in my back pocket today. It's there if I need it, but I don't think I lead with it anymore. I think I lead much more with my vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that in itself, you talk about being a badass. I'm a badass for vulnerability. I am unapologetically vulnerable today.
You are. And in your leadership, I agree. I see you lead with that. Like with the recent events unfolding in the Middle East, I've witnessed you really being vulnerable from your lived experience, your shoes that you're sitting in, and being really open to learning, hearing other perspectives, and vulnerable about how it's impacting you. And I know this to be true at the front of the room when you're leading courses. Like if you make a mistake, you'll say, "Oh, I got to just stop everyone." Like you're relentless in showing your vulnerability, which is also very unique, in this world specifically right now with how divisive things have become and polarized things have become. What's it been like for you to lead during these times and to coach during these times?
Well, to be honest, when I'm leading and coaching, my focus is on others. Okay. So I don't bring in my experience so much in those realms. But I think where I'm really showing up in what you're talking about now is in my relationships with other people. I've made it a point to reach out as much as I possibly can to people that have similar views and opposing views as mine, that have different life experiences, that see things perhaps differently than me. And I'm not only doing that interpersonally, but I'm also um, uh, listening to podcasts. Like a shout out to, I think it was a couple of weeks ago with Yara. And I'm also in touch with a lot of my Muslim friends. And I'm just reaching out to people and looking to both support and be supported. Because it's, I don't know if it's obvious, but I am Jewish. Okay. For those of you that haven't, figured that one out yet, I'm a New York Jew.
Yeah.
And, and my parents were refugees from Nazi Germany. So this is, this is real for me, and I'm, navigating it as best I can. And I think that in terms of the work that we do, my wish is that we can have more interactions that are, coming from that coaching perspective, which is curiosity, listening, also being a stand for what you believe in, but also being, if I go back to, the badass acronym, I think, when it comes to what's going on in the world right now, we need boldness, authenticity. We need to disrupt the status quo. Yeah. We need to be agile and, be able to, see other people's perspectives. And we need to be supportive and spacious. And what I mean by spacious is it's the opposite of command and control. It's the opposite of my way or the highway. It's really allowing space for others to shine. So I think that that can apply both in organizations and in government, and also a lot of the work that I do outside of organizations, which is, working with marginalized communities. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because, well, before we go into that, can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you grew up in New York? Just that's such a really beautiful context for where we'll go next.
Okay, so I think I had a really interesting upbringing. I grew up in what I consider integrated neighborhood. I actually was born on the borderline between Harlem and Washington Heights. I then moved further uptown to Washington Heights proper, and it was a real combination between Jewish, Irish, and Latino. It was right also at the time where integration was starting to happen. So I went to school. It was a rainbow of different races and ethnicities and religions. And I count myself as really, really fortunate. It was also a pretty tough neighborhood. I learned it very, very, I said earlier about my vulnerable, I was a sweet, vulnerable kid. It was also crazy. I mean, I had a lot of range as a kid. But I learned very, very early on that my vulnerability was not in that environment. It wasn't an asset. So I very, very quickly built a lot of protection around that. But really deep down inside, I was, a softie.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I forgot the question.
Well, that was the question. I wanted you to share a little bit about your context, like where you came from, because from my perspective, it's informed like it's like your brand of coaching stems from that neighborhood, from those early days.
Right.
And you've always been a
Yeah.
stand for marginalized communities and doing your work to uncover your unconscious bias. And you do work inside correctional facilities, and you and I both have a shared passion for this particular audience. So what is it for you about bringing coaching and leadership development to incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people that feels important to you and part of your mission?
So interesting, because I'm looking at my computer right now, and I took a course on white supremacy culture, and uh, white supremacy culture is like staring at me right this sec. And so I turned 65. What was it? Almost 7 years ago.
Hmm.
And for all of you out there that haven't hit 65, I promise you, when you hit 65, you're gonna have it's kind of like a come to Jesus reckoning. Like I realized that there were more years behind me than in front of me, and I had this moment. What's going to be on my tombstone, and what was written is that Yale middle and upper management performed better, which isn't bad. I don't want to say that's bad, but it's not what I wanted on my tombstone. And I realized actually the question that you asked earlier about my upbringing, I realized that I was in a white bubble, or I should say a privileged bubble. Okay. And at that moment, when I turned 65, I happened to be reading a book called The New Jim Crow by I believe it's Michelle Alexander. And in it, it talked about the school to prison pipeline, that really the new Jim Crow is and I don't like to call it the criminal justice system. I call it the criminal injustice system.
Amen to that.
And
yeah. I mean, that's so what it is.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
I realized at that moment that there could be infinite places I could put my focus, but that was the place that I wanted to put the next. I don't know. At 65, I thought, well, next 15. I made up the next 15 years of my life, and within a month, I was teaching a class in New York City, and a woman participant said that she worked at Rikers Island. And I, grabbed her and not literally grabbed her, but you know what I mean. I asked her if she was open to talking to me about this. And I told her, could she get me into Rikers? I want to do some coaching. And she said, actually, I have no sway at Rikers. I'm an intern there, but my father works in the criminal justice world. And believe it or not, he runs an organization called the New York City Citizens Crime Commission, right? He's a lawyer that, supports marginalized communities and institutions to help in the area of criminal justice. She introduced me to him, and you know how it is. It's his daughter, so he listened to me.
Yeah.
I wish I could say it was my fantastic, enrollment abilities, but the truth is, his daughter created some leverage, and then he introduced me to that organization, SNOW, that's anti-gun violence, and I was able to convince CTI to donate 3, and thank you, CTI, shout out to CTI. They donated 3 fundamentals, and that's what got me started. And that was almost, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. And since then, as I've worked for you brought me into SOAR. I worked with some reentry programs, and last October, for the first time, I was able to bring a fundamentals into. And fundamentals is the beginning class for CTI into a maximum security prison. And I feel blessed. I mean, that's, probably one of the peak experiences of my life.
And these systems are organizations. So, we're talking about the ROI of coaching. I know we've titled it the workplace, but in a system, in an organization. So that peak experience, bringing a coach training to these incarcerated folks. What did you see? What unfolded? What was it like? Bring us there.
Well, first of all, before I get into the actual what you're at, I want to give a shout out to Anna Greta Maziana, who I co-led it with.
We love you, Anna Greta.
Shout out. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to RICO, which stands for Reentry Coaching Academy, which is made up of formerly incarcerated people that are coaches now, and they brought CTI in, to become part of their program. And the company that we work for is Core Civic, and that's a private prison system. And you talk about ROI. Core Civic is a it's a public company, but it's not a federal or state prison that they manage, or it's outsourced to them. And they are realizing actually that in order for them to operate more effectively, they have to create a coaching culture.
Yeah, they do.
So, yeah, big time. Okay, I think they get it on a big time level, and we had the opportunity to train 15 incredible human beings. 70% of them are not going to get out of prison. The entire class, I never got the feeling that anybody in the class was innocent of their crime. There was none of that coming up. I don't know that for a fact, but there was none of that energy. And they were by far the most innocent human beings I had the opportunity to train.
Beautiful.
Innocent, excuse me?
It was so beautiful what you just shared. Yeah.
Innocent, and what I mean by that is they were open, they were willing, they were vulnerable, they were courageous. They were so appreciative.
Yeah.
That we were there. And I was having multiple aha moments training them. I mean, I got as much out of the training as they possibly could.
Yeah. Eric, it's such a good use of you. I'm glad at 65, that image of the tombstone got so clear.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Yeah. I was saying I'm 71 now, but yeah.
Yeah. But, you set an intention at 65 in the past 6-7 years. This is, these are the organizations and the systems that you're spending more time in. And like you and I have talked about at the House of Pies, where we like to meet, or on park benches in Central Park, just how we view any organizational system. There are very similar things put in place that create certain functions. So if we just get really specific for a moment on coaching, the skills and the concepts, how does coaching help an organizational system to UpLevel?
I'm going to use, because like I said, I've been a Capgemini for 20 years, so I've seen the arc of coaching in that organization really, really clearly. When I first came in, and I would say it was Capgemini, but I would also say it's the consulting world, was really about best practices, transforming systems, providing the best technology, a lot of the doing aspects of consulting and outsourcing and all of that. And the consulting world now gets it, that in order to really provide maximum value, relationships are important. And that does actually impact the bottom line. And what I mean by that is, I think there's two major things, at least in that business, but I think it's in a lot of businesses, is that it used to be cash was king or queen. Now relationship is king or queen.
Mm.
And what we mean by that is that now organizations realize that actually long-term relationships, both externally and internally, impacts the bottom line. And it's also just the right thing to do. It's both. And what I mean by externally, if you're providing true value to your customers and clients, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, they feel like they're part of the solution, whatever solution they're looking to create. So that's the external component. The internal component is that we talked a little bit about this earlier. If your people feel valued, if your people feel heard and seen, if your people feel that, wow, my organization really sees the impact and the brilliance of my work, they will look forward to coming into work. They will look forward to contributing. They will look forward to growing as the business grows. So I think that is a really major asset to coaching. And I think the second big is what we were talking about earlier, that we're in a VUCA environment, and navigating you can't navigate VUCA from command and control. It just does not work. Okay. And coaching is such a good, I think, solution to navigating the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity, and the volatility. I know it's volatility, but I would also say the vulnerability of the workplace. So, I mean, I'm not saying that coaching is the only answer. That there are other, worthy systems and solutions out there. I am saying it's a damn good one.
It's definitely part of the solution, right? That's why we're doing a full season on it. Because in these times, organizations and leaders, we know they need more support than ever. They need more anchors. They need more inner resource so that they can serve their teams, their people, their missions. It's why we're in this conversation. So you said it beautifully, and all the different ways that you've been able to bring the technology into different populations. This question feels like kind of trite, but I think it's important, specifically for people who are new to coaching. If you were going to bottom line the 3 top skills from a coaching competency context for leaders to learn in this moment in time, what would you say those would be?
Listening, powerful questions, acknowledgement.
Tell us what acknowledgement is. No, you didn't. Tell us what acknowledgement.
Okay, acknowledgement is the skill of speaking what you see in the person in front of you. So, Christy, you are a gusher of possibilities.
Yeah.
That's an example. That's an
Yeah.
example of an acknowledgement.
And the impact for
Yeah.
folks listening, if you might have not seen my face because you're hearing our voices as like my cheeks flushed and I felt like a little girl because you feel seen. And so it's vulnerable, right? To be acknowledged and to be seen. It's as vulnerable for the person receiving as it can be for the coach or the leader acknowledging the person. And it does take presence, right? Because we want it to be genuine and heartfelt. So sometimes I know for me, I have to take a breath and this really tune into this person, right? Um, how do you think the skill of acknowledgement could support people during these times, not just in the workplace, but in our homes, in our communities, in our schools?
Well, I say this in every class whenever we get to the part around acknowledgement. I say this one skill can change a whole organization.
So
Just practicing this one skill on a daily basis will transform whatever environment you're in. But, we're specifically talking about, the ROI inside organizations. I know that because I practice it.
you do.
And I see the impact. And I also know the power of acknowledging and also the power of self-acknowledgement. Like, I think both are important. It's just, if you're a leader inside an organization, you have to know what your unique value proposition is, what it is that, and I got a clue for all of you. It's not what you do. Okay, that's not what your unique value proposition is. Your unique value proposition is something about who you are as a human being. And I have a really great story that I'd like to share, actually, around that. And I don't know this for a fact. It might be urban legend, but the story, I think, speaks for itself. So when Barack Obama was a junior senator, he had to give a speech to the entire Senate, and the Senate Majority Leader at the time watched it. And he told this story on one of the late night. It was either Letterman or Leno. It was that far back. And he was telling the story of this was before he became president. He was talking about this young junior senator that he was watching. And Barack gave this incredible speech, that just moved the whole Senate. And after the speech, the Senate Majority Leader ran up to Barack and said, "You are an amazing speaker." And Barack said, "Yes, I know." And Leno or Letterman said, "What an arrogant thing to say."
Yeah.
And the Senate Majority Leader said, "Actually, he said it with complete humility. He knew that in order to achieve what he needs to achieve, he's got to own that part of himself."
Folks, did you hear that? In order to achieve what you want to achieve, you have to own these parts of yourself, your strengths, all the goodness, all the things that maybe make you blush when someone points them out. And what about owning our shadow side, Eric? You know a little bit about that. What's important about that within our leadership to own the parts that maybe, we're not so proud of?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to any leader, any coach, needs to be working on themselves as much as possible. I mean, we have to continually grow as human beings, and I think all leaders that are worth their salt in the universe, as soon as we went to those dark, wonky places.
Yeah.
But I like to say for myself, it's exactly my darkest or the places I want to hide the most that actually make me a brilliant coach. So, like, for instance, my entire life, I've had a condition called essential syndrome, essential tremors, which just basically means my hands shake. And as a man, that was a part of me that I was always trying to hide, right? And I couldn't be with it. Okay. And so I was, always had my hands in my pockets. If my hands were showing, I tried desperately not to shake, and of course that made it shake more. And at a certain point, I owned that part of myself, and I realized that condition that I have, all it means is that I shake when I feel. I shake when I'm scared. I shake when I'm happy. I shake when I'm sad. I shake when I'm angry. I feel, exponential. I'm an exponential feeler.
Yeah, you are.
And when I realized that, that's when yeah. I saw the gift at that moment, and actually used that dark part of myself. And there's many dark parts. I mean, we could spend hours on all the darkness.
We could do another podcast. We could talk about that. It's something you're so vulnerable, and you share these shadow parts. I feel like part of your unique impact in the world, not just in coaching and the folks that get to work with you, but you're so vulnerable about the shadow side, about the parts of you that you're like, yeah, this ain't perfect. I'm in the goo. I'm in the mess right now. I'm working through shit. Like, you're so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you break down barriers because of your courage to be in the gook and share it. Like, hey,
Thank you.
And it's you're a model to me, and I know many of our colleagues because of that, for many other reasons too.
Now you're making me cry. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start bringing our conversation to a close, and I want to know now, 6-7 years later, after you envisioned your tombstone, and you're like, I don't like, this is fine, but now I'm going to UpLevel my tombstone. Eric, what do you want it to read?
Wow, I never really thought about it, but I guess it would be my life purpose. He was a clueless, bad motherfucker who lovingly and vulnerably transformed people. And don't ask him how he did it, because he didn't know.
Sitting in the silence and feeling the truth of your words and how you've lived. Going to hold that with you. Yeah. So from this place, and perhaps to the context of the ROI of coaching in the workplace, and maybe not, what are your final words in this moment, my friend?
Well, first of all, it's been an honor.
I love you.
Love you too. And I'm trying to make a connection with the ROI. I think The last thing I want to say is that, it's probably obvious to anybody that's listening, I'm not a data person. So when it comes to ROI, I can't really speak to that. But yeah, I'm bringing it back to Capgemini. They brought coaching in for 20 years. So I may not have the numbers, but that's the number I can give you.
Yeah.
Is that if one company is bringing in coaching for that long, and they are all about the numbers, they're a consulting company, then we're doing something that is providing value.
There you go. 20-year investment from an organization who's seen different leaders come and go, and they continue to invest in this program. They also continue to invest in Eric Kohner. I think that's a big part of when folks are bringing in coach training to the organization. It's finding a partner that is holding. It doesn't have to be the coactive technology. There's other technologies, but we want more coaching in the workplace. So finding a great external partner so that you could have like a 20-year relationship with the different stakeholders who come and go over time. So what an incredible part of your legacy, Eric. And
there's one other thing. You're reminding me of a joke.
Yeah, give us the joke. Give us the joke.
Because it's right. It's right in alignment with what you just said. I always say that if you're going to create a relationship with an organization, you need to really develop a strong, powerful connection with somebody that's in-house so that you can be a viable outhouse.
You heard it here first. Become the viable outhouse or be the viable in-house person. But let's just get coaching into the workplace. Let's get coaching in the workplace. I want to hear more stories of leaders like Eric, in this moment and 30 years from now too, when folks who are just getting started in this profession can look back and tell some of the stories that you've been able to share with us today, Eric. How can people stay connected to you and bring your work inside their organization? We'll put it in the show notes, but give us a bottom line.
Okay, bottom line, you can reach me at Eric, ERIC, at Ecosystem. Ecosystem is EKCOSYSTEM.com. Or you can go to my website, ecosystem.com.
We love you, Eric Kohner.
From LinkedIn. Thank you.
Find him on LinkedIn. And we'll tag him in everything, so you'll be able to find him. We love you, Eric. Thank you.